Even though there are fears that COVID is set for a comeback this winter, Boris Johnson is urging Britain to get back to work. But for the millions of us who have young children, this is often easier said than done. At this nursery in South London, many of the parents are relieved that once again they can get on with their working lives, safe in the knowledge that their children are being well cared for.
She was so excited to go back to nursery. And when she saw all her teachers on the Zoom call, she was like screaming out. She was really excited to come back. She loves nursery.
How important is it for working parents to have nurseries open?
Very important, because without the nurseries we can't go to work, and that's the bottom line. And the nursery is, and sometimes it's a safe place for children, and it's for them to interact and have fun with their friends, and it's a nice place, nurseries. Regardless if you're working or not working, nurseries are nice for children to come into.
But with the infection rates rising in some areas and the government imposing more restrictions on gatherings, there are fears that the respite for busy parents might be short-lived. Are you worried that nurseries might close again?
I am, yes, because I was actually at the point where I was starting to think about looking for work again. But if that happens, obviously it won't, be able to work because I'll have two tiny children to look after again. I know a lot of people are worried about, another rise of infection coming up and what that could look like as schools are phased back in. So yeah, obviously it's preying on our minds, and it's something that we're, really concerned about because we're just starting to kind of get some sense of routine back for the children.
This nursery is run by a company whose chief executive is proud that she managed to keep going throughout the COVID lockdown, providing childcare for essential workers.
A lot of our parents work in the NHS, so we started to think about how many nurseries we could keep open, and so eventually we ended up with 15 open the whole time.
And how hard is it to socially distance in a nursery?
Well, we didn't socially distance in the nursery. We created our own bubbles before anyone came up with the idea of bubbles, because children need comfort, and they're human. They need touch, and it's part of their learning. So there was no issue there. And I think once parents realised that there was going to be no issue there, they were far more relaxed. Can you imagine you're a busy doctor in the NHS? You want to leave your child somewhere safe. You do not want to be going away worrying that your child isn't going to be picked up or cuddled or cared for. So no, we put all of that out of their minds. And interestingly, throughout lockdown, no child got sick and no staff member got sick.
So how difficult is it for nurseries now?
It's terrifying because nurseries run on occupancy. And our occupancy pays for our staff costs, and the contribution we get from the government, which is often determined as free, is not free. We have to subsidise that as well, and because we're a social enterprise, we subsidise a large number of children who would otherwise not be able to afford nursery. There are some real risks around though. So there's an organisation called CEDA that does quite a lot of our research, and they have said that they anticipate around 37 to 40% of nurseries, particularly in areas of deprivation, who are living very much on the edge.
So 40% are at risk of closure?
Of closure, yeah.
And what would another lockdown mean for nurseries?
I think financially it would kill a lot of us. I mean, I really do. And I do wonder why the government doesn't appreciate the fact that we were the fourth emergency service during lockdown. It took them a long time to clap for us, The 76% of parents work, and they don't have extended networks and kinship and stuff. And you might be working from home, but we all know it's very hard with a small child.
And also, I guess, parents who rely on grandparents for additional childcare support can't happen.
And then what about the children themselves? They're entitled to access to their own nurseries. They love their nurseries. They thrive in their nurseries. They need it for their learning. And that's not to say parents aren't great with their children, but there are other things. I can't tell you how many parents said to me they hadn't realised just how much friendships matter to children as young as 2. And how, even though we did Zoom and we did home learning and we did digital this, that and the other, the warmth and the engagement and the experience you've probably just seen this morning was missing through that digital lens, and that's really significant. And what's really sad is that so many children from poorer families haven't come back. They've been really terrorised. I think they live on the edge anyway in terms of poverty. Poverty is like really sort of on the rise. And when you talk to those parents, which we did, and we provided meal packs and we provided all sorts of additional things, they really were terrified that if anything went wrong, their very narrow, sort of scary, boundary would tip into disaster for them.
So what can the government do?
The government needs to really acknowledge the sector. They need to acknowledge that we are part of their national infrastructure, and as such we should be funded correctly. There already, before lockdown, we were £662 million shortfall. towards the contribution of offering the 30 hours and not. And so the government needs to have a very clear statement that they value it, and that's the model that they've got at the moment. Maybe it's not the greatest model because it's very mixed. Maybe they need to spend some time looking at that.
If the economy is to recover from lockdown, then parents need to be able to get back to work. But right now, that's easier said than done. Many can no longer rely on grandparents or after-school clubs that are still closed. Thousands of nurseries are at risk of going bust. And with rising infections, another lockdown could send them over the edge.